The ghost lived in the scent of high-octane fuel and hot metal. It was a sound, too. The phantom scream of an F1 engine that sometimes echoed in the quiet of her garage late at night. Juliana Ryder. Jewels to the handful of people she allowed past her front gate. Rand Ryder's Restoration, a one-woman shop on the forgotten end of a sleepy coastal highway. The sign was faded, the building a nondescript cinder block rectangle, but inside was a sanctuary of automotive genius. Classic cars, from Mustangs to Porsches, were resurrected under her expert, grease-stained hands. At 34, Jules wore her reputation like armor. She was the best damn mechanic on the coast, a prodigy who could diagnose an engine's ailment by its cough, a master who understood the soul of the machine. Her hair was perpetually tied back in a messy knot, her face often smudged with oil, and her eyes held a guarded, watchful intensity. She moved with a coiled efficiency, as if every wasted motion was a personal failure. People said she had a gift. They also said she had a past. They were right on both counts. Her previous life had been a blur of roaring engines, flashing lights, and the razor's edge of victory. She had been the youngest pit crew chief in Formula One, a woman in a world of men, faster and smarter than them all, until the accident, a race in Monaco, a catastrophic brake failure, a car spinning into a wall at 180 miles per hour. The driver had lived, but his career was over. The team, looking for a scapegoat, had pointed their manicured fingers at her. They called it human error. Her error. She hadn't fought it. She had simply disappeared, trading the roar of the track for the quiet hum of her garage, exchanging the pressure of split-second decisions for the slow, methodical process of bringing old things back to life. She trusted engines. They were honest. They told you exactly what was wrong if you knew how to listen. People, she had learned, were far more complicated and far more treacherous. Miles away in the hushed, cathedral-like quiet of the Oak Haven Town Library, Leo Maxwell lived a life measured in paper and ink. At 28, he was the town's head archivist, a gentle soul with kind, curious eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and a dusting of freckles across his nose. His world was one of preservation, of stories waiting to be rediscovered in forgotten manuscripts and brittle, yellowed photographs. He was raising his 16-year-old sister, Chloe, after their parents had passed away a few years prior, a responsibility that had grounded him in a quiet, steady maturity. His life was calm, ordered, and predictable until the day a lawyer's letter arrived. His grandfather, a man he had only known through faded photographs and family stories, had passed away and left him his entire estate, a small, neglected farmhouse on the edge of town. The house itself was modest, but in the dusty, dilapidated barn, beneath a canvas tarp heavy with a decade of dust, was a treasure, a 1967 Jaguar E-Type, Series 1. Its British racing green paint was faded, its chrome pitted, its leather interior cracked and smelling of mice and memory. But its lines were still perfect, a symphony of automotive design. To anyone else, it was a wreck. To Leo, it was a story. He found his grandfather's old driving gloves in a glove box, and a faded map with a route up the coast marked his grandmother's elegant script. This car wasn't just a machine. It was a vessel of his family's history, of a love story he had only heard in whispers. He knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he had to bring it back to life. "You're crazy," Chloe told him, peering into the dusty interior. "This thing will cost a fortune to fix." "It's not about the money," Leo said, running a hand over the car's curved fender. "It's about the memory." He asked around town, who could possibly handle a restoration this delicate? The name he heard again and again was the same, spoken with a mixture of awe and caution. "You need Jules Ryder, if she'll take you." They said she was the best, but they also said she didn't suffer fools. Leo, who had never so much as changed his own oil, felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. He was, by every definition, a fool when it came to cars. Getting the Jaguar to Ryder's restoration was an ordeal. The tow truck driver, a burly man named Gus, whistled when he saw the car. An E-Type. Haven't seen one of these in years. "You taking this to Jules?" "That's the plan," Leo said. Gus just shook his head. "Good luck, son. She's a miracle worker, but she's got the bedside manner of a cornered badger." Jules was underneath a cherry red '65 Mustang when they arrived, only her grease-stained boots visible. The garage was an orderly chaos of tools, engine parts, and the scent of gasoline and hard work. "I don't take walk-ins," a voice, muffled and metallic, came from under the car. Gus, the tow truck driver, said to leave it here, Leo called out, his voice sounding thin in the cavernous space. There was a clatter of a wrench hitting concrete, and Jules slid out on a creeper. She sat up, wiping a streak of oil from her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a dark smudge. She looked at Leo, her eyes sweeping over his clean, collared shirt and soft-soled shoes with a look of profound skepticism. Then her gaze fell on the Jaguar. She stood up, her movements fluid and economical, and walked around the car. She didn't touch it. She just looked, her expert eyes taking in the rust, the decay, the faded glory, a flicker of something, interest, respect, cross her face. "A Series 1 Roadster," she said, her voice a low, gravelly hum. "You don't see many of these anymore, especially not in this state. It was my grandfather's," Leo explained. "It's been in a barn for 20 years. "I can tell," she said dryly. She ran a hand over a pitted chrome bumper. "This isn't a repair job. This is an archaeological dig. It'll cost you more than your house." "I know it won't be cheap," Leo said, his hands shoved in his pockets. "But it's important to me. It's family." Jules looked at him, her expression unreadable. She hated sentimentality. Sentimentality was what made people make stupid decisions. And yet, she couldn't deny the pull of the car. To bring this machine back from the dead, it was the kind of challenge that quieted the ghosts. "I have a 6-month waiting list," she said, her tone a clear dismissal. "I can wait," Leo replied, his voice surprisingly firm. "I'm a librarian. Patience is my job." She raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Fine. Leave it. I'll call you when I have an estimate." She turned and slid back under the Mustang, the conversation clearly over. Leo hesitated, then scribbled his name and number on a piece of paper, leaving it on a clean spot on her workbench. As he walked out of the garage, he felt like he had just left a precious family heirloom in the cave of a sleeping dragon. To Leo's surprise, the call came just 2 weeks later. It was Jules, her voice clipped and professional. "I have an opening. You're Jaguar. I can start next week. The estimate is in your email. It's non-negotiable." The number in the email made Leo's stomach clench, but he didn't hesitate. He replied with a single word: approved. The first time he visited the garage after she started, the car was already unrecognizable. It had been stripped down to its bare metal frame, its components carefully laid out on labeled tarps. It looked vulnerable, skeletal. Jules was in the engine bay, her focus absolute. "You can't just stand there," she said without looking at him. "You'll be in the way?" "I want to help," Leo said. She finally looked at him, a smirk on her lips. "Help? What are you going to do? Read it a bedtime story?" "I can clean parts," he offered, undeterred. "I can organize things. I'm good at organizing." She stared at him for a long moment, then pointed to a bucket of greasy, soot-covered engine components. "Fine. Go nuts. There's a degreaser over there. Don't get any on your fancy shirt." And so began their strange, unspoken routine. Several evenings a week, after closing the library, Leo would go to the garage. He would meticulously clean and polish every nut, bolt, and piston she handed him. He learned the names of tools, the difference between a socket wrench and a torque wrench. He was clumsy at first, but he was a fast learner, and more importantly, he was quiet and respectful of her space. He started bringing her things: a thermos of hot, strong coffee, sandwiches from the local deli. He noticed she often worked through meals, fueled by nothing but stubbornness. She would accept them with a gruff, "Thanks," and not much else. But slowly, things began to shift. He started asking questions, not about the mechanics, but about the history. "Why did they design the hood this way?" he asked one night, polishing the famous E-Type bonnet. She paused her work, surprised by the question. "It's for aerodynamics," she began, then caught herself. She explained the design philosophy of Malcolm Sayer, the brilliant aeronautical engineer who had shaped the car. She spoke of wind tunnels and drag coefficients, but also of beauty and form. Leo listened, captivated. In return, he brought her stories. He had used the library's archives to find old articles about the 1967 E-Type, reviews from car magazines of the era, even the original dealership brochure. "Look at this," he said one evening, showing her a faded advertisement. They called it the most beautiful car ever made. Enzo Ferrari said that. Jules looked at the ad, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. He wasn't wrong. They were building more than a car. They were building a bridge between their two worlds, a shared language made of steel, oil, and stories. She was a mechanic. He was an archivist. And together, they were slowly piecing together the soul of the machine. The work was slow and painstaking. Weeks turned into a month, then 2. The Jaguar was slowly being reborn. The frame was restored, the engine rebuilt piece by piece, the bodywork painstakingly smooth and primed for paint. Leo's presence in the garage became a fixture. He had graduated from cleaning parts to helping with sanding and prep work. His hands, once soft and accustomed to paper, were now calloused and stained. He found a deep satisfaction in the physical work, in the tangible progress. But Jules remained an enigma. She was a fortress of solitude, her walls built high. He would catch glimpses of the woman behind the armor. A flash of a smile when a difficult part finally fit, a moment of quiet pride as she surveyed their work. But she never spoke of her life before this garage. One night, a late-season thunderstorm rolled in, the sound of rain hammering on the metal roof of the garage. The power flickered. Jules was working on the brake lines, her focus absolute, when a loud clap of thunder shook the building. She dropped her wrench. It clattered on the concrete floor. When Leo looked over, she was frozen, her face pale, her knuckles white where she gripped the edge of the workbench. She was staring at nothing, her eyes wide with a terror that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "Jules," he said softly, "are you okay?" She didn't seem to hear him. He could see her chest rising and falling too quickly. He recognized the signs of a panic attack. He moved slowly, deliberately, not wanting to startle her. "Jules," he said again, his voice calm and steady. "It's just the storm. You're in the garage. You're safe." Her eyes finally focused on him, but they were still haunted. "The sound," she whispered. "The screech of the tires, the impact." The words hung in the air, a raw, unguarded confession. He understood. Her ghost wasn't just a memory. It was a sound, a feeling. He didn't pry. He didn't ask for details. He simply went to his worn backpack and pulled out the thermos of coffee he had brought. He poured a cup and held it out to her. "Here," he said. "Just breathe." She took the cup, her hands trembling so badly the coffee sloshed over the rim. She held it with both hands, anchoring herself to its warmth. They stood in silence for a long time, the only sound the drumming of the rain and her ragged breathing, which slowly, gradually returned to normal. "Thank you," she finally said, her voice hoarse. She wouldn't meet his eyes. The next evening, when Leo arrived, there was a new tension in the air. Jules was all business, her walls back up higher and thicker than before. He knew he had seen something she didn't want him to see. He had seen the crack in her armor. He didn't push. He just went to his work, sanding a piece of trim. But before he started, he placed a small, cloth-bound book on her workbench. It was a thin volume of poetry about the sea, about storms and survival. He didn't say a word about it. Later, after he had left, Jules picked up the book. She opened it to a random page. A single line seemed to leap out at her. "The harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are for." She closed the book, a strange ache in her chest. The quiet librarian, with his books and his stories, was becoming more dangerous than any roaring engine. He was seeing her, and she wasn't sure she could bear it. The Jaguar was painted a deep, lustrous British racing green, the color of a forest at dusk. It was beautiful. Jules was supervising the final stages of the reassembly, a process as delicate as open-heart surgery. Leo was there as always, handing her tools, his presence a quiet, steady support. Their rhythm had become a comfortable dance. They spoke in short-handed gestures and half-finished sentences. The garage had become a shared space, a haven. The disruption came in the form of a low-slung, obscenely expensive black Ferrari that slithered into her driveway one afternoon. A man in a tailored Italian suit stepped out, his shoes crunching on the gravel with an air of arrogant ownership. It was Marcus Vance, the owner of the F1 team that had ruined her. Jules froze, a wrench in her hand. The blood drained from her face. The ghost of the racetrack, which had been quiet for so long, began to scream in her ears. "Juliana," Marcus said, his voice a smooth, predatory purr. He walked into her garage as if he owned it, his eyes scanning the space with a look of amused disdain, until they landed on the Jaguar. Well, an E-Type. I heard a rumor. You were hiding out here. Play with old toys. I see the rumor was true. Leo, who had been buffing a piece of chrome, straightened up, his friendly face hardening. He instinctively moved to stand slightly in front of Jules. "Can I help you?" Leo asked, his tone polite but firm. Marcus's eyes flicked over Leo, dismissing him as an irrelevance. "I'm here to speak with the mechanic." He turned back to Jules, his smile all teeth. "I need a new pit chief for next season, Jules. My last one lacked your killer instinct. I'm willing to forgive and forget. Triple your old salary. A fresh start." "I'm not for sale, Marcus," Jules said, her voice tight. "Oh, everything is for sale," he purred. He walked over to the Jaguar, running a hand over its perfect fender, leaving a smudge. "This is a beautiful machine. A classic. I'll buy it. Name your price. A finder's fee for you, of course." "The car is not for sale," Leo said, his voice quiet but steely. "It's mine." Marcus finally gave Leo his full attention, an eyebrow raised in amusement. "You? The librarian? Don't be foolish. You can't handle a car like this. This is a thoroughbred. It needs to be on a track, not gathering dust in a library parking lot." He turned back to Jules, his voice dropping to a low threat. "Don't be stupid, Juliana. You don't belong here in this junkyard. You belong with me, on my team. Think about my offer. I'll be in town for a few days. Don't make me have to persuade you." He then turned and walked out, leaving a trail of expensive cologne and unspoken menace in his wake. The silence he left behind was heavy and toxic. Jules stood frozen, her face a mask of old trauma. She looked smaller than Leo had ever seen her. "Jules," he said gently. "You should go," she whispered, not looking at him. "This has nothing to do with you." "The hell it doesn't," he said, his voice fierce with protectiveness that surprised them both. "He threatened you. He threatened us." "There is no us," she snapped, the fortress walls slamming back into place. "There's a car and a client. That's it. Now get out. I need to work." She turned her back on him, picking up her wrench and attacking a bolt with a fury that had nothing to do with the car. Leo stood there for a long moment, his heart aching for her. He knew that Marcus hadn't just come to offer her a job. He had come to remind her that she was his, that he still had the power to break her. And Leo knew, with a librarian's quiet certainty, that he had to find a way to rewrite that story. Leo left the garage that night feeling a cold, unfamiliar anger. He wasn't a fighter, but he was a fierce protector of the things he loved. His sister, his library, and he was beginning to realize the wounded woman in the grease-stained overalls. He went to his own sanctuary, the library archives. Marcus Vance had threatened Jules, had called her past failure into question. Leo believed in the power of the written record. He believed that truth, however deeply buried, left a paper trail. He started digging. He spent hours online, delving into the deep, obsessive world of Formula One forums. He read every article, every blog post, every fan theory about the Monaco crash. The official story was simple. A brake line, incorrectly fitted by Jules Rider's crew, had failed under pressure. Human error. But as he dug deeper, he found the whispers. A deleted post from a junior mechanic on the team, complaining about a bad batch of hydraulic components from their supplier that season. A rumor in an obscure Italian motorsport journal about another car from the same team having spongy brakes a week before the Monaco race. Small, disconnected threads. The real breakthrough came from the library's own microfiche collection. He scrolled through weeks of old financial newspapers from that year. He wasn't looking for headlines about racing. He was looking for business deals. And he found it. 2 days after Jules was fired and the human error narrative was cemented, Marcus Vance's holding company had acquired a significant, controlling interest in the very company that supplied their hydraulic brake components, a company that would have been financially ruined by a public recall. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was a motive, a massive multi-million-dollar motive to bury a manufacturing defect under the career of a single brilliant woman. He cross-referenced the supplier's corporate filings. He found the name of their chief engineer at the time. A quick search revealed the engineer had retired abruptly a month after the acquisition, moving to a quiet life in rural Vermont. Leo felt a surge of adrenaline. This was what he did. He followed the stories. He connected the footnotes. He found the truth hidden in the margins. He spent the next 2 days on the phone, using a series of gentle, persuasive pretexts. He was a history student writing a paper on F1 engineering. He was an automotive enthusiast researching vintage brake systems. Finally, he got the retired engineer on the phone. The man was cautious, reluctant to talk about the past. But Leo didn't push. He just listened. He talked about his grandfather's car, about the beauty of old machines, about the importance of getting things right. And slowly, carefully, the old engineer began to talk. He spoke of a batch of faulty calipers, of pressure from the F1 team to keep it quiet, of NDAs and golden handshakes. He told a story of a cover-up. Leo recorded it all with the man's permission. He now had the full story. Not just the whispers, but the truth. He printed out the articles, the financial records, the transcript of the call. He put all into a simple, unassuming manila folder. He didn't know what he would do with it, but he knew that Jules deserved to have her story back. She deserved to know that the ghost that haunted her was not her own failure, but someone else's lie. Marcus Vance returned to garage 2 days later. He didn't come to negotiate. He came to collect. "I trust you had time to consider my generous offer," "Juliana," he said, blocking the garage entrance with his expensive car and his even more expensive ego. Jules was buffing the final coat of wax on the Jaguar's fender. She didn't look up. "I considered it. The answer is no." Marcus's smile tightened. "That's a disappointing answer. I might have to remind the world of your history. A little press release. A reminder to the classic car community that the hands working on their precious machines are the same ones that ended a man's career. It would be a shame for your little hobby shop to go out of business. Get out of my garage, Marcus," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Not until we have an understanding," he said, stepping closer. "You will work for me. You will be my brilliant chief mechanic. And you will be grateful for the second chance I am giving you." He reached out to touch the car. "And I'll be taking this lovely machine as a signing bonus. The librarian can send me an invoice." "Take your hand off my car." The voice came from the back of the garage. It was Leo. He stepped out from behind his shelving unit, the manila folder in his hand. He was no longer the intimidated bookworm. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard as stone. "And who is this?" Marcus sneered. "The library mouse, come to squeak in defense of his cheese?" "I think you want to read this," Leo said, placing the folder on the hood of the Jaguar. Marcus laughed. "I don't read fiction." "This isn't fiction," Leo said. "It's the financial records of your acquisition of Bremner Hydraulics. 2 days after you publicly blamed Jules for the Monaco crash. It's the service logs from the week before the race, noting spongy brakes. And it's a sworn recorded statement from their former chief engineer, detailing the batch of faulty calipers he was forced to sign off on." Marcus's face went white. The color drained from it, leaving a pasty mass of shock and fury. He snatched the folder and flipped through the pages, his bravado crumbling with each turn. Jules stared at Leo, her mind reeling. She had spent 5 years believing a lie, carrying a failure that was never hers. She looked at the folder, at the proof of her innocence. You did this for me," she whispered to Leo. "I just found the story that was already there," he said simply. Marcus slammed the folder shut. "This is nothing. Slander. You have no proof." "Oh, I think I do," Leo said calmly. "And I've already sent a digital copy to the International Motorsport Association's Ethics Committee and to a very interested journalist at the New York Times." He looked at Marcus, his voice dropping to a quiet, devastating finality. "Your story is over, Mr. Vance. It's time for Jules to tell hers." Marcus stood there, utterly defeated, the architect of his own ruin. He looked from Leo's unwavering gaze to Jules's face, which was no longer filled with fear, but with a slow, dawning, and powerful sense of freedom. Without another word, he turned, got into his Ferrari, and sped away, leaving only the smell of his burning tires and a story that had finally been set right. In the silence that followed Marcus's departure, the garage seemed to hold its breath. Jules walked over to the folder on the hood of the car. She opened it and read, her hands tracing the words that unraveled 5 years of undeserved guilt. Tears welled in her eyes, but for the first time, they were not tears of pain or panic. They were tears of release. A dam inside her had broken. She sank onto a nearby stool, the papers in her lap, and finally let herself grieve for the career she had lost, for the years she had spent hiding, for the woman she could have been. Leo didn't speak. He just came and stood beside her, his presence a quiet, steady anchor in the storm of her emotions. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She leaned into his touch, and for the first time since the accident, she didn't feel alone in her pain. When the tears subsided, a new, unfamiliar feeling took their place. Lightness. The ghost that had lived in her hands for so long was finally gone. She looked up at him, her eyes red but clear. "Thank you," she whispered. The words felt too small for the weight of the gift he had given her. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I just wanted you to have the truth." She stood up and looked at the Jaguar. It gleamed under the garage lights, no longer just a project, but a symbol of their shared journey. It was perfect. It was finished. "It's done," she said, her voice full of quiet awe. "It's ready." "Yes," he said, "it is." The next day, a Saturday, the sun was a warm, gentle gold on the coast. The air was clean and smelled of salt and sage. Leo arrived at the garage not in his usual work clothes, but in a simple, clean shirt and jeans. Jules rolled back the big garage door. The Jaguar sat in the sunlight, a jewel of green and chrome. She held out the keys to Leo. "She's all yours," she said. "Your story to drive." He took the keys, but then he held them out to her. "Only if you're in the passenger seat." She smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed her face. "Deal." He opened the passenger door for her, a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that felt both strange and wonderful. She slid into the cool leather seat, the smell of the restored interior a perfume of accomplishment. He got in the driver's side. He turned the key. The engine, silent for 2 decades, roared to life with a deep, throaty purr. It was a sound not of a machine, but of a heartbeat, strong and steady. He didn't race out of the driveway. He pulled out slowly, carefully. They drove not toward the highway, but towards a winding coastal road, the one that hugged the cliffs above the sea. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The sound of the engine, the feeling of the wind in their hair, the sight of the endless blue ocean stretching out beside them. It was a conversation all its own. This wasn't a race. It wasn't about speed or performance. It was a journey, a slow, beautiful drive with no destination in mind. He reached over and took her hand, his fingers lacing through hers on the center console. She didn't pull away. His hand was warm and steady. Her hand, for the first time in 5 years, was perfectly still. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, he pulled over at a scenic overlook. They got out and leaned against a car, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. "It's beautiful," she said. "Yes," he said, but he wasn't looking at the ocean. He was looking at her. "It is..." He had brought her back her past. She had given him back his grandfather's. And in the quiet garage, surrounded by old tools and new feelings, they had built something entirely new together. Something strong, resilient, and beautiful. Something with a story all its own. If the story of healing, trust, and the quiet courage it takes to rebuild touched your heart, We would be so grateful to know, where in the world are you today? Every story has a home, and we'd love for you to share yours in the comments. What does it mean to you to find your own story? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Liking, sharing, and subscribing is the fuel that allows us to keep restoring these stories and sharing them with the world. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new journey. Thank you for being here, for listening, and for believing in the beauty of a second chance. We'll see you on the next open road.